the longest stare down yet. I think we made it the furthest into the song when the stare down ended.
Here we are again. Welcome
Finally back. By the way, I want to say to the loyal few that listen to this podcast on a regular basis, last week we were going to record on Thursday. I think it was Thursday, and it just all fell apart. It fell apart all week. Almost fell apart for this week too, by the way. The wrangling that's had to happen behind the scenes that you're not aware of. It's intense. And anyways, I forgot to take it. People were probably sitting at their computers 3 o'clock last Thursday or Friday, whatever day. We had to plan. I think it was Friday, actually. We had eventually pushed till Friday, and then it couldn't happen. Anyways, the point is I forgot to take the event down. So there were probably a few people disappointed that they did not get to see their favorite podcast.
The 3 or 4 very loyal listeners that we have were probably disappointed. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're glad to be back. It's a sneak attack today. I don't think a lot of people expected us to be here on a Monday, and here we are. And I think we had to get together because there's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about, and we missed big stuff. Classic Poor Sports content last week was just brimming, or coming over the brim, whatever I think it's brimming. We're brimming with Poor Sports content.
But what I feel like my point that I said to you over text stands. Is that if it's truly Poor Sports, then it makes the most sense to talk about it
later when nobody cares.
Yes, after the ship has sailed on the relevance of any topic. So here we are. I would say not too far into the future later, and we're ready to talk about these topics now. So why don't you go ahead? We should probably dive right in because I know today we might have a little bit less time than we typically do. So let's give us a rundown of what we're here to talk about today.
So we're going to talk about, because this happened last week, we're going to talk about Bill Walton's unfortunate passing. He pulled a Norm Macdonald, by the way, and had, to my knowledge, after doing a search, like I think he's old, so nobody was incredibly surprised that he died, but I don't think anyone expected him to die like now of prostate cancer. Also, like I think kind of similarly mercurial, like Norm Macdonald. Angel Hernandez, we finally saw the end of Angel Hernandez. He didn't die soon enough for a lot of people's tastes. The Mariners, another rest in peace to Mariners offensive coordinator Brant Brown, who was fired by the Mariners.
It's a lot of departures.
Yeah.
A lot of departures.
Caitlin Clark is slowly being beaten beaten to death, and and then we still have on the topic list, which I don't care if we get to or not, is Anthony Edwards, just a generic Anthony Edwards topic. And then one other thing that I think we could start with this briefly, because another player, and I can't even get the guy's name, and my phone is across the room. By the way, I've had a hectic day. I had to go pick my the baby up at daycare. She had diarrhea, so we have to get her. If she has diarrhea,
Jesus.
She has to come home and be at home for 24 hours without diarrhea. And I just want to say this. If in my work life, if I had to go 24 hours without diarrhea to be able to go to work, I'd have to be on permanent disability. There's no way I could ever live a life, have a job, maintain an income if going 24 hours without diarrhea was like a primary element of being able to go to work.
This is why they need an injured reserve for everyday jobs, so that you can continue to make money with no expectation of actually working, and they can extend for weeks or months at a time. Like, think about like an Anthony Rendon. That guy never plays baseball, but he paid millions. Imagine if you could just pick up your salary all the time from work and never actually have to go to work. That's the dream. How come we all can't have that? So
I know. Yeah, and then I'll tell you real quickly, I was thinking about recording with you on Saturday, which you might not have done. I was going to text you about it, and then I found out that my wife had surprised me. Early birthday present. We got an Airbnb in Seattle and went and got drunk all over Seattle, which is, by the way, as a couple with 2 kids, like, we drink a fair amount at home. We're not like dorks, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people, I feel like they have kids and then they make kids so much a part of their identity that they don't do anything fun anymore, and like that almost becomes another part of their identity. I don't think you and your wife are like that. You guys seem to make it out of the house with each other and without each other pretty often.
Yeah. Wait, can I I feel like yes, we're right in the middle as you are, but
Sure.
there's the other side of that. There are the people that are equally annoying that quote unquote date each other. You know, they date each other. I'm still dating, and then they're like every time they go out, it's like all over social media, and you're like,
Oh
look,
yes.
we get it. Like you
Well, I will
guys,
say this: there's
you're the,
probably a selfie from several Wednesdays a month in my wife's phone of a date that we went on, and my daughter, our youngest daughter, or sorry, our oldest daughter, will go every time we're gonna do one of those. My mom comes over and watches them, and she goes, "What are you guys dating again?" So she's already shaming us for what could be a social media post.
yeah. So that helps make you aware that it's a bad idea to publicize it to that degree. I get it.
Yeah, here's comedian Mike Hansen. I only want to hear about WNBA Rookie of the Month, I almost said Caitlin Carlson, which Kate Carlson is a comedian in the Northwest. Caitlin Clark is who he's talking about, who's become the subject of a lot of controversy without doing like a ton either direction to warrant it, I would say.
Yeah. Do you want to start there? Is this what you
Sure,
want to
let's
start
do it.
with?
Let's do it. I've seen some clips about, so first off, Angel Reese and her, I said this earlier maybe this year, might have been last year when they had the first matchup between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. But this is going to be like the WNBA's Magic and Bird, and they're going to be a rivalry for the entire time they play. And frankly, like I've seen some pretty like stupid discourse on the WNBA from all sides, people who support it, people who don't support it, etc. What I can say is these two players have made the WNBA more interesting, more compelling than it's been in its entire history. And that's great for the WNBA. And they need more of this pro wrestling shit, not less of it. Like I feel like there's a part of it where people are like, these are ladies. They should act like ladies. And it's like, no, these are athletes and they're acting like athletes. They're pissed off at each other. It's a physical game. This is great for the WNBA. We can talk about the controversy all we want. The fact that there's even a controversy is great for the WNBA.
Yeah, it's at no point in my life did I ever think I'd be leading a discussion about anything that started with the WNBA. So,
Sure.
I mean, just in our own lives, this has gone too far. It's too far. It's out of
Wow.
control.
Alex thinks
Yeah.
that women should be in the kitchen. Is what he's a real Harrison Butker on the other side of this.
It's we're at the point now where this is when you know a topic has blown out of hand is when it gets so meta that people are reacting to other people's reactions about the topic. It's like it's not even about the topic anymore. Like Caitlin Clark is not the story anymore. The story now is all the people on ESPN and how they have reacted to it and how they're not reacting to it well enough, right? Like regardless of how they're reacting to it, it's not good enough. It's like
Yeah.
it's they're being demeaning towards women or towards certain races. It's a racial issue. Now it's a gender issue.
Sure.
It's like it's not even about the sport anymore. It's like it's
but
so
again, that's
far
like-
beyond that. Yeah.
That's like we've acknowledged when you're at that point. It's like there was a point with the WNBA where it was like they were constantly trying to convince you of stuff that's like just frankly not true. That the game is like the same as the men's game and all this stuff like we've talked about in the past where there's like they're trying really hard to like really squint their eyes to make it seem like it's the same thing. Doesn't matter. It's compelling. Right now it's compelling. And I've seen people that are like, well, you weren't there was the lady on First Take, I don't know her name, and I don't watch First Take. I just saw the clip, but it's she's like, "Stephen A, you weren't talking about the WNBA 3 years ago." And it's like, yeah, so it's that old saying like what's the best time to start talking about the WNBA? 3 years ago. What's the next best time? Right now. Like do it right now. He's doing it right now.
I mean, I think a lot of that reaction to the reaction discussion that's happening is contrived. I mean, that if you're ESPN, you're going to keep spinning that out of control until you're reacting to the to the 10th degree, to somebody's reaction to a reaction to a reaction to a reaction. Because if you keep doing that, if you're ESPN or whatever entity that's talking about the story, you're just going to keep the story going and you're going to keep eyes on you. And that's all you want. So I think a lot of it is contrived. Like, if Stephen A. Smith says something off color about this topic and the rest of ESPN can react to it, that's great for ESPN, right?
Yeah.
They're creating their own news cycle basically out of thin air,
Yeah.
and because they have a vested interest in the WNBA, then it makes sense. Now, if you're the NBA or just basketball in general, NBA and WNBA have a real chance, a real opportunity right now to kind of become like the NFL in a way, where the NFL dominates the news cycle, 365 days a year. They never take an off day. If you're the NBA and the WNBA, like this is your chance. Like that was kind of the dream with the WNBA being played off season from the NBA, right? That was always the thought is like, hey, if people really get into the WNBA and the NBA, then they're watching basketball year round. And that's exactly what we want. And now for the first time ever, 25 years, 20, maybe even longer than that since the WNBA was first conceived, that's maybe coming to fruition a little bit. So,
yeah,
if you're all about basketball, this is a golden opportunity for you. But the interesting thing with Caitlin Clark, man, and I think by now most people have probably seen the clips of her just getting really cheap shotted in games.
Sure.
It's such a polarizing topic because there are people that are like, we should not let this person who is now the WNBA's cash cow just become, bludgeoned to a point where they can't perform, right? Like, because you do run the risk of injuring somebody who has become really the face of the game, so to speak. And at the same time, you have the other side that says this is exactly what has to happen for her to prove herself within the game. And it's what happened to Michael Jordan in the 80s. There was everybody was fouling the crap out of Michael Jordan when he first came into the league. It's like, yeah, but they were fouling him within the confines of the rules. Like watching someone just stand there and get shoved from behind it's kind of dirty. So it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's clearly it's a funny take for people to come in and say like this shouldn't happen simply because this person is the new face of the game. Like that's just not how sports work. That's no competitor is going to allow that to happen. But you can kind of see both sides of it at times because there's valid opinions on either end.
So Angry Jack Harlow on, I believe this is on Twitter, is another comedian named Stephen Ryan who says she deserved it. And I will say after it's one of those things where you read a news story and you find out the truth later. And she did there was an elbow that she was being retaliated against for. It's the difference between a foul in a loose ball situation and a technical foul that's an intentional foul. And and by the way, I'm going to make one pushback against what you said. Fouls are literally against the rules. That's why there's a rule there, right? That's why it gets called. Now, if it's if it's a flagrant foul or if it deserves a fine or a suspension is maybe a different question. But I do think to do this thing, first up, the two things, narrowing the tip on who's allowed to have comments on the WNBA because, oh yeah, this is good. He said, I just meant because she's white. Perfect. That's the perfect take from Stephen Ryan. By the way, very funny comic who did a guest spot. He called himself guest spot. I wouldn't let him do a guest spot the weekend of my special taping. I specifically asked the club to not let him. But he's also the guy that's cooking your chicken wings at Tacoma Comedy Club, just so you know. Anyway.
Don't say anything bad about him.
Yeah, don't say anything too bad. Anyways, so I think when you get to this point where you're narrowing who's allowed to be a WNBA fan and policing how they're a fan, you get into this same kind of thing that's going on in media right now where you get it's this audience capture thing where this incredibly small minority becomes the vocal face of this league, and it turns a lot of people off that may otherwise really be into this. And right now you're entering a time where I think the WNBA has a chance to take part of the mainstream, and they're gonna fuck it up if they keep trying to do this purity spiral of how you can be a WNBA fan. And that's gonna be again, it's the fact that we're having an argument over whether or not this lady, the fouls were cheap shots or whatever, this is great for the WNBA. The WNBA is not used to them being a source of a ton of disagreement because most of the time they're faced with indifference from the mainstream media, right? And it's now is the time. Shut the fuck up, quit whining, and let people debate it.
Well, and I think this is where for a lot of people, there are differences in the men's game and the women's game that kind of become apparent in situations like these. Now, obviously, shoving somebody during a dead ball when they're not looking is a cheap shot by any standard,
Sure.
right? Like, we can all debate if someone's driving to the lane and gets hacked, whether it's dirty or whether it's within the confines of the game.
Sure.
But if someone's just standing there not looking and gets shoved, that's pretty much dirty, and everyone agrees. However, I will say that in the women's game, typically, when you watch it, it's a lot more physical than the men's game, where a lot of the physicality in the men's game has kind of been outlawed through the rules that the NBA has put in place to kind of increase offense and allow scoring to occur.
Sure.
The same hasn't really been done as much for women's basketball. So it's a much more physical game when you watch it. And a lot of what she's being subjected to, maybe within the actual rules of the game, can look, much worse than maybe it really is, or how people playing the game would perceive it, or true fans of the game would perceive it. So, obviously there's a glaring example with the one cheap shot that we've seen so far, but some of the other things, like, teams taking it, playing rough against her on defense and stuff like that. That's standard behavior, I would say, especially for a superstar. I mean, people act like, some of the reactions to how teams are defending Caitlin Clark make it seem like they're treating her unfairly. And it's like, she's on the team that had the number 1 pick in the draft. And generally that's the worst team in the league. Her teammates are not great at basketball. That's what it means. And, similar to when Jordan came in with the Bulls, they didn't have the number 1 pick, but they weren't very good. They were still a lottery or, top of the draft team. And when you're on a team like that, you don't have a lot of help. And so it becomes really easy to shut down the best players. But, in recent history, we just haven't seen a ton of that. I feel like for NBA fans, especially, there hasn't been a ton of that. I mean, the Cavs were terrible when LeBron came in, but that was 21 years ago. And LeBron was so unique that he kind of was able to overcome a lot of what was happening. And also that was at the same time when they were really starting to phase out a lot of the physical nature of the NBA game. So we just haven't seen anything that's kind of like what Caitlin Clark is going through before. And as a result, I think it's just people just don't know how to react to it because of that. And that's where you're getting all of these differing opinions. The reality is, for those of us who just historically have not engaged in that sport or that league, none of us really know what we're talking about,
Yeah, that's fair.
And how many like hardcore fans have you seen? We don't know a ton of hardcore WNBA fans to begin with, but how many have you seen come out and have a strong opinion either way? I think that's the thing. It's like, I'm sure there are people out there who are doing that, but there's just not enough sources of that information for informed opinions to really be heard at this point in time. And maybe in time that will occur, but it's like, I don't think Stephen A. Smith is like an informed WNBA fan for as much as he does know about sports. He can't be the person that's leading the charge on these discussions, right? Like, it seems unfair.
So I'm going to let Mike Hansen give us some information on what the fuck this means. This is an extension to this is Pat McAfee today.
Yeah.
While we move on to Bill Walton, though, because I don't mind Pat McAfee. I'm not against Pat McAfee.
I know exactly what it is. It's not, I don't know how his opinion on the topic was carried out, but he basically referred to Caitlin Clark as a white bitch, and that got him in all sorts of trouble, which,
okay,
makes sense.
I like how much he pushes the envelope. To me, he feels like the way a bunch of comics do comedy that I don't necessarily want to do, but I'll defend it for being offensive, or whether or not it's offensive. I will defend it because it holds the levies out against me.
Yeah, again, this is how quickly the news cycle goes. That Pat McAfee said that this morning, and he apologized by like lunch. So it's it's just the news cycle happens too quickly now.
Okay, so Bill Walton passes away, and he's a fixture on Pac-12 games. The end of the Pac-12, like the Pac-12 officially. Oh yeah, that's right. Kennedy, by the way, I don't like the spelling of Kennedy. I'd like to just say that, but Kennedy called Caitlin Clark a bitch before she hit her. I'm hoping that Mike didn't or had a typo in there and isn't being a fucking edgy comic. But anyways, Bill Walton dies. I think Bill Walton was like divisive at points. There were definitely people that did not like the way Bill Walton called a basketball game. To me, he had like a Niehaus like quality, a Dave Niehaus like quality, where it's like he could call. I mean, Pac-12 basketball over some stretches has not been the most entertaining product in the world, and he was always fun to listen to. He's a guy that like something like Dick Vitale, something like Kevin Calabro could take a game and turn it into something entertaining, whether or not the matchup itself was particularly entertaining or if the game was particularly compelling or close. I liked him for that, but I certainly I'm open to. I also saw the stuff. This always bothers me when it's like a 71-year-old dude, and this guy's lived however many years, and he makes one comment on homeless people. Which I don't even know I haven't even actually been able to track down what the actual comment was. The least charitable version is he thinks that all homeless people should be arrested, is what I read. And people are like, fuck him, glad he's dead. And that's like how they define his entire life, is this one thing he said one time late in his life instead of all the great he's done. This dude has marched for every liberal cause in California for years. And then the moment he doesn't meet the level of puritanical standards required to be accepted in like the progressive space, they're like, fuck you, glad you're dead. Nothing you've ever done meant anything. Eat a dick, rot in hell.
I think they should clip exactly what you said and play it at Bill Walton's funeral. The whole thing. That could be his eulogy. It'd be like, what a tremendous legacy this man left behind. I didn't even know about the last part, so that's
really?
news to me.
I'll send you it's crazy.
Bill Walton, I mean, he's a unique character. I'm a huge Pac-12 basketball fan, so to me,
you're the one guy. He's literally an audience of one sometimes.
It's interesting because over the years on Twitter, picking up various followers for the various things I care about, which is kind of all over the place. There's like a niche of people that I follow that we like mutually follow each other that are as into Pac-12 basketball, usually through the lens of the Huskies or sometimes the Cougars. They're as into it as I am. And so they're the people that like I saw their reactions to his passing when it happened. And everyone's kind of on the same page. It's like, even if you hate the way that Bill Walton calls a game, or he really doesn't even call a game. He's like an analyst on the game, but
sure.
What he analyzes is nothing to do with the game typically. You had some sort of like appreciation for what he did because it's unique, right? Like that's what's different about him, is that even if you don't like it, you understand that it's different than the ordinary play-by-play you get during a game. And so for that in and of itself, it becomes, an attraction when it happens.
Yeah.
And for me, I liked it because, I watch a lot of Pac-12 basketball games, not even just my own school, but it'd be one of those things where like, if I'm just like going through the games or going through channels and I see there's a Pac-12 game on and I see that it's on ESPN or Pac-12, and I know those are Walton's networks, and I flip to it and it's not Walton on the call, I'm probably switching away to a different game. But if it is, and I have nothing else to watch, no other reason to watch the game, and he's on the call, that would keep me there. Because like, I want to watch the game, yeah, but like, do you really need an analysis of every play in a basketball game? Like, if you're watching it on TV, you can pretty much see what's going on. Now, if there's some kind of like questionable call or something that demands your attention, like a guy gets injured or something like that, then obviously you want, a narration of what's going on. But most of the time, you can see what's happening. You don't need every single play broken down as it's happening in front of you. And that's where Walton was interesting. And, to the network's credits, they always paired him with a play-by-play guy that could still carry the action in spite of all the chaos that was going around them with their partner. And you saw a lot of those guys react when he passed away. Dave Pasch, Roxy Bernstein, some of the guys who ended up calling games with him with some frequency. Jason Benetti was another one. And they all had a lot of emotion, a lot of respect for Walton. And the interesting thing about Walton too is, his career really had levels to it. He was once one of the greatest players in college basketball history. He became, a highly respected NBA player whose career was basically cut short or, mitigated in some way by injuries. Then he became an NBA broadcaster in like the 80s and 90s. And he wasn't particularly unique. He was just like a normal, straight-laced analyst on NBA games, and that
Yeah.
was part of his growth. And then he kind of reemerges in the last 15 or 20 years as this very unique character in the annals of college basketball and broadcasting. And so just the way that he kind of changed and developed and really kind of showed what a person can be on all different levels is probably one of the most inspirational things about him. It's like, if you don't know anything else about Bill Walton, he shows you what you can do as a person, as you develop, as you grow, as you age, and how you're never done. So, to me, that's kind of what his legacy was. He was the guy that, like, because we would go to the Pac-12 tournament every year for basketball, and there were two things that stood out that I'll always remember. One, this year he wasn't there, and that was like, me and all my buddies who were there like knew something was bad.
Yeah.
Right? Like, something's bad, even if you don't know, like, because no one said anything. Like, we knew if this guy isn't here in Vegas for the tournament, something has gone terribly wrong, because
It's
nobody
it's a little
me.
bit like OJ not tweeting for a month.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost exactly the same.
Yes, and then the other thing that every time we would go to the tournament, and we would always sit. It's kind of a free for all at this arena. You can kind of sit wherever you want. So we'd go down close, and so we'd often be behind where the broadcasters all sit on press row. And he stands out, in that situation. Sure. He's the only guy not wearing a suit usually, and he's a head taller than everybody else. And fans would come up to him all the time. They would come up, and anytime there would be a break in the action, whether it's between games or halftime or whatever, they'd come up to him, and he would stop and talk to every single person. Anyone who wanted like a selfie with him, he would take a picture with them. He'd smile, he'd give the peace sign. When he got up to walk, along the road to go use the bathroom or do whatever he had to do, people would stop him along that route. He'd pose with every single one of them. He had time for every single person that approached him, which there are people like you and I that wouldn't want to do that.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely not that guy. So I don't even aspire to be that guy.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine somebody who's like famous to a lot of people, especially in that environment where probably everybody in that arena knows who he is. And he's not only willing to make time for all those people, but like seem very glad to do it. So
yeah,
just a really gracious person, and it sucks that he's gone. And in some ways it's you go out on your own terms. So the fact that he didn't let people know he was leaving, kind of like Norm, it's like, it sucks that we didn't get a chance to like know and be able to like process what was happening in the moment. But respect him for doing what he felt was best, and probably just devoting that time to the people he really cared about, which he certainly deserved to do after all the time he gave to other people.
Yeah, what I'll say about Bill Walton is I think that I remember a lot growing up, because I'm a huge Kevin Calabro fan. I think Kevin Calabro, I know Dave Niehaus gets a lot of love in Seattle. I think Kevin Calabro is the best announcer I've ever seen, and I remember watching Kevin Calabro for an entire season, and then he would go call playoff games where he was not always calling Sonics games. In fact, I think he was like, it would be like just probably not a random assortment of games, but it was like it was quite often that he was not the guy calling Sonics playoff games. And especially when the Sonics weren't in the playoffs, like the years that they weren't good, you would hear him. He was such a magical announcer in Seattle, and you would hear him on a national broadcast, and you'd be like, everything that made him amazing, they like reined in a little bit. And it was, to me, it felt like Bill Walton never, and maybe this is like part of the last 15, 20-year transformation, is he let all of Bill Walton come out the same way that while Kevin Calabro was calling Sonics games in Seattle, it was free-flowing. It was like, nobody gave a shit if he flubbed a word, or like he was saying wild shit, like stuff. I don't know. I would love to get him on the podcast sometime to talk about how that stuff came to be. If flying chickens in the barnyard comes out of his mind in that moment, or if it's something like a phrase he has planned. Is he open micing this shit? I don't know. I don't know how this is happening. And I feel like Bill Walton was the same, where it was like he was such an authentic, unpolished in a good way, right? Like the way that he announced the game was like charmingly unpolished.
Yeah, I think regardless of what it is you're doing with a microphone in front of your face, there's kind of two ways people generally react to it. I mean, you either button up. Yeah.
Two in the pink. One of the, this sounds like a Calabro call.
Yeah. There's some famous Calabro calls that are
Did he
slightly
say
off
two in the
color.
pink, one in the stink? Did he actually say that on air?
He said a variation of it. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's
All right, we gotta find that.
It's I remember hearing the drop of it on the radio, but yeah, I mean, I think especially when you're an announcer, it's like you're just used to people almost knowing your every
Two in the
thought
cake,
and
one in the
what-
pudding. Jesus.
Yes. Yeah. Close.
Oh my God. Can you imagine TNT letting him call another game after? So that's what I'm saying. What a brilliant guy.
Yeah, you gotta be sly with the way that you drop those in there when you're a broadcaster. And
Oh,
yeah, no,
amazing.
obviously very different styles between the two of them, but yeah, to your point, I mean, it's like, hey, if you can be yourself and have a microphone in front of your face all the time, like they're going to gravitate towards that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I value authenticity, and I think there's both those guys, especially Calabro when he was in Seattle calling Seattle games, which, hopefully he's able to call a couple Seattle games again at some point in the next couple years. Two guys that were very authentic. Okay, so first off, I think let's cross Anthony Edwards off the topic list right now. Again, we're pushing him again. I don't even know what we're talking about with him, so maybe it's something very important, but well, I want to talk about Angel Hernandez briefly. He doesn't deserve a ton more than that. He's the guy. He's the famously, I think, like not only is he considered one of the worst umpires in baseball, but like modern analytics really support that. He's always at the bottom of the list on like strike zone accuracy. He seems to have a shitty attitude about it too. He also seems very indignant about being one of the worst umpires in baseball. In his retirement speech, which is a retirement speech that came after he sued Major League Baseball for discrimination, lost, and then Major League Baseball bought him out, and that's what led to his retirement. He said that he had a childhood dream of becoming an umpire, and I cannot imagine a more dorky dream. It's like there's kids that grow up being cops. This kid's like growing up to be he's like dreaming of being a meter maid. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get it. It was a weirdly phrased, very abrupt retirement announcement. And I saw people reacting to that particular line in his announcement. And I feel like it was almost, for all the mistakes he made as an umpire, here's just one more. Like he just didn't really think it through. It was like, this sounds good in writing, so I'm going to put it in there. And, for all the insistence that he wasn't forced out of the game, I think it's pretty clear he was. I think just by the language in his retirement announcement, by the abrupt nature. I mean, how often have you seen I don't know that we've ever seen an umpire like forcibly removed from the game mid-season.
It's pretty rare you even find out that they retired.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the social media era has not helped umpires like Angel Hernandez, right? Before social media, if your umpire, if the guy you were watching sucked at calling a game, the only people you could vent to were your buddies, right? And nobody else knew your opinion, so we couldn't crowdsource our negative thoughts about umpires in general. But with social media, that's not the case anymore, and people can really let a guy like Hernandez have it. It's interesting. I remember from the late 90s or early 2000s, one of the publications out there, like a Sports Illustrated or something, they did, one of those anonymous polls where they ask players who they're, about all sorts of things in baseball. Like, what's your favorite this? What's your favorite that? Who's the nicest guy in baseball? Stuff like that. And I remember one of the questions that they asked was, who's your favorite umpire to all of these players? And the guy who they all picked was Angel Hernandez. And that stuck with me for a really long time. I remember even, in the last few years when the heat really came down on Angel, I remember I always thought about that poll and how, 20 years ago, this guy was like everybody's favorite ump. And, at the time he was obviously much younger, probably a little bit more on his game at the time. Obviously when you're in that profession, as you age, it's got to be tougher to do your job. Even if you're still good at it, it's just got to be tougher to do it every single day. So at one point in time, Angel Hernandez was not the most reviled man in the umpiring industry as he has become. But when you watch videos of his work now, boy, it's rough. I mean,
Yeah.
it's more than anything. I feel like for umpires, the strike zone is what really gets them. If you make a bad call on the field here or there, unless it's just something absolutely egregious, like that call, Jim Joyce's call many years ago for the Armando Galarraga perfect game, unless it's something that glaring, really a lot of the highlights that are lowlights we see of umpiring are balls and strike calls.
Sure.
And, for Angel Hernandez, it seemed to be just an entire reel of bad ball and strike calls over the last few years. So it was long overdue, and it really kind of speaks to what's next. If you're not going to tolerate the guy that was probably consistently rated one of the worst umpires, should other umpires who are equally bad be nervous as well? Like, who knows what comes after this?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think Angel Hernandez did himself no favors by becoming a pain in the ass for the league as opposed to just a bad umpire. I'm sure that like legally they can't hold that against him, but that's why they had to pay him money instead of just firing him. Like they didn't just fire him; they paid him to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so long live Angel Hernandez, favorite umpire of players in the 90s. It's been fun to see modern analytics have him show up often as a guy who made like the worst ball call or the worst strike call or one of the worst of the year. I remember Jeff Sullivan, who wrote for Lookout Landing, and now I think he works for the Tampa Bay Rays. But he every year he would do videos of like the Pitch FX worst ball and strike calls of the year, and yeah, Angel Hernandez was a frequent make frequent appearances on that list.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. I mean, he's kind of become a little bit indignant about his underperformance. I still don't think of him as like one of the worst umpires in baseball. Like from a personality standpoint, like the guy that always stands out to me is CB Buckner. And maybe it's because he's got a real smug look on his face all the time when he's making his bad calls, but that guy seems to have more run-ins with players and managers than anybody else. Like, it's a few of the ball strike calls that Hernandez made, you would see players flip out. But like on a regular basis, no matter where he's umpiring, whether it's behind the plate or in the field, a guy like CB Buckner seems to just inspire. It's almost like he's inviting, confrontation with guys to him. And so it's like, to me, there are worse umpires out there personality wise, but just from like a purely calling the game standpoint, yeah, Angel was bad. The other, I don't know if this guy is still umpiring, but Phil Cuzzy, who's a longtime umpire, who's another older guy. Cuzzy and Angel Hernandez looked enough alike that if either one of them were on the crew for your game that you were watching, you really couldn't tell them apart. And so if Phil Cuzzy is out there still umpiring, and he's not nearly as bad at this as Angel Hernandez is, he's got to be very grateful that Angel Hernandez is now gone, because no one's going to mistake the two of them. Like it was as simple as if I did a search on Twitter, like if I wasn't sure if it was Cuzzy or Hernandez and I just searched for one of their names, I would have my answer in like 2 seconds, because people would like fill up there would be some conflict over who it was, but there would be enough mentions of them that you would know who it was.
Looks like Phil Cuzzy still alive and still umpiring, as far as I can tell. So,
and he's old. He's like
68 years old.
Okay,
you look at that guy and you're like, I mean, that's like, this dude is right in between the ages of my mom and my dad, and I don't think either of them should be facing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs that might get fouled off into their face mask. I'm trying to make us be able to play the home run game, just so you know. Wait, hold on. This is a Mike Hansen. Your guys' beards both look like both sides of Velcro. Do you guys get stuck together when you kiss? We do like the that like a hole in the sheet that people have sex through. We use that to kiss. That's how we avoid getting. We don't have time to get stuck together. We're very busy people, so
we can't go into all the details right now. It's very intricate.
Yeah, and we're on a time crunch, so we can't talk about how we make out all the time. The Mariners fired Brant Brown, a guy who was their offensive coordinator, who I think that's the first time that position has existed in baseball, as far as I'm aware. It's a thing that you would expect from a team that was very innovative, and had it worked and had it been the Astros, I think every team would have had an offensive coordinator next year. I think I saw you tweet it at some point early, maybe before the season, about how at some point they're going to fire Brant Brown, and that will be what they credit for their turnaround. And that's like kind of what has happened since he got fired. They've had 2 good games, I believe, since he got maybe 3 good games since
Yeah,
he got fired.
I
You and
gotta
I
go.
talked,
I gotta go back and look this up. Keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. You and I talked about this earlier in the year, which is that the Mariners were striking out at a very high rate, and at some point that would stop with no, like, it would slow down and return, like, regress to the mean with no change in approach from them. And I think that's kind of what we saw in May and in what we're seeing at the beginning of June, where it's not like everybody's approach has changed a ton. And we could go look at, I'm going to go look at, I'm downstairs with one computer screen and a dying battery, so my screen is about as dim as it can be. But I will look up like the whiff rates compared to the like swing out of the zone rates and all that. But this this is a lot of this is just luck correcting itself. Bad luck correcting itself is my genuine belief. However, there are guys like Ryan Bliss, Ryan Bliss is primed to become my favorite player on the Mariners. A guy that walks a ton, doesn't hit for a ton of power, steals bases like a maniac, and who cost essentially nothing. He was a throw in. He was like maybe the best overall piece, but he was part of the Paul Sewald trade that we talked about last year, and a guy that I liked his profile I liked a lot. But he was like, he's 5'6". He's like an unconventional looking guy for that position. And then old Steven Ryan, Angry Jack Harlow, Victor Robles will save us. You tweeted about that today, and I looked it up, and I remember when Victor Robles was considered, like, expected to be in the, like, Juan Soto stratosphere, and I did not realize that he had one full season and then has been like a part-time player since then and never been a good hitter. I thought he would have had at least a couple seasons. If we'd have played the home run game with Victor Robles, I'd have fucked myself.
You don't have to go any farther than Victor Robles' Wikipedia page to see how bad of a hitter he is. Because every year that it breaks down in his professional career, it talks about how he is in the lowest 1% of hitters in exit velocity. He has the slowest hit balls among all qualified MLB hitters. So if you don't have to go beyond the
Is
Wikipedia
that what you
page,
want? Or is that not what you want?
yeah, if you don't have to go beyond the Wikipedia page to understand that a guy's a bad hitter, that's never good. Like you usually have to dig into some advanced stats to figure that. The Mariners offensive coordinator position, they first of all, they did no favors calling it that. Like, do not call it something that is synonymous with what I would consider to be an anointed or glorified position in another sport, because everyone's just going to make fun of it. Like, and another thing, if you're Brant Brown, like, demand they change it before you sign on, because you don't want to be called like you said, if it's the Astros, if you're getting hired as this new offensive coordinator for a team that can actually hit the damn ball, then by all means, go ahead and accept. But when you're coming in to help out one of the worst hitting teams in baseball that historically just doesn't hit well, maybe make sure that your title is as muted as possible, so that when they go on the lookout for a scapegoat, no one's looking for you. Like, the only things I ever saw about Brant Brown on any sort of social media from Mariner fans was mocking the position. And it had nothing to do with Brant Brown. He might be like the nicest guy you've ever met. I have no idea. But he was issued a death sentence from the moment he became an employee of the team because of the title of his job and the nature of how this team hits. It was unfortunate for him, but it made him an easy scapegoat when the offense struggled again and they needed to get rid of somebody. I get very conflicted about the Mariners' approach to hitting because, and we've talked about this before, but I think for whatever reason, they have a really great approach to pitching. It works for all their pitchers. They're able to catch lightning in a bottle with guys who you would never expect to perform well. And they're also able to advance the careers of guys who are highly touted and turn them into elite arms. So for pitching, it works great. But their approach to hitting, for whatever reason, they just keep throwing more and more people at their hitters. They have more and more positions to fill, they have more coaches, and they have tons of information, and they keep trying this approach, and it just doesn't work for whatever reason. And we don't know why. And that's where it becomes really tough. If we don't know why, and I would imagine they probably don't know why either at this point, or else they'd have a solution to it, then it becomes really difficult to like trust anything that's going on. And I'm sure that the players feel that to some degree too. I'm sure the players don't really know who to listen to. They all have their own independent hitting coaches. And hitting coaches at the major league level are not like your little league hitting coach or your high school hitting coach. They're not there working with you on your swing every day necessarily. They're there to help bring you information and, about the pitchers or about, your own swing or whatever it might be, and help you just kind of process that info and do with it what you will. So they're not out there like physically reconstructing your ability to hit a baseball if you're struggling to do that. They're just trying to give you as much info as possible. One thing I think a lot about is if it's too much for these guys, and information is good, but there is a point where you are overloaded with information. And that happens to any of us. It's not just baseball players. It's like in the job that you do. If somebody overloads you, like say it's day one of your job and somebody gives you everything you need to know on day one, you're not going to process it. It's way too much. It's drinking from the fire hose, so to speak. Right. And that's kind of, it seems like that could be happening with the Mariners. And of course we don't know, so we have to speculate. Right. But something isn't working here. Something isn't working where they're just giving them too much info, if that's what it is, or the players aren't able to kind of take what they're hearing and apply it. We don't know. Or maybe they just all suck at hitting. Maybe it's as simple as they can't hit. And I think it has nothing to do with the coaches.
I certainly get what you're saying. The argument against that is that it's happening across the league. It's not, I guess maybe by hiring what they're calling an offensive coordinator, the Mariners are somehow at the leading edge of something, maybe the leading edge over the cliff. You don't really know. It certainly has not, it did not seem like a fruitful hire, but everybody's getting that same information, and not everybody is hitting as bad as the Mariners are. Also, Puyallup Coog, formerly Ben Coog, who has maybe moved back to Puyallup, said, was the Mariners offensive coordinator hired from the John Donovan School of Offensive Thought. Anyways, let's. I want to move on to the home run game because, and I love you, Ben Coog / Puyallup Coog. Did you move back to Puyallup? That's the real question. Why is this name changed?
The people need to know.
The people need to know.
Last thing I would just say about the Mariners offense and their offensive coordinator as a whole is like, it seems like they're probably not going to backfill that position now because the team's hitting. But it could be as simple as like they obviously have a lot of guys that are focused on hitting, providing that info, and sometimes just removing one voice is all you need. Like maybe the information is relevant, but the way it's being delivered or presented to these people isn't working for them. And maybe that's all it takes sometimes, like just because we've all been, if you've played any sport at any point in your life and had a coach, like there are some coaches that get through to you and there are some that don't, whether it's as simple as like, hey, when you're swinging the bat, like just put your elbow up or put your elbow down, whatever it might be, that's on a very much simpler scale than what these guys are dealing with. It can get through to you with the right voice, and maybe that's just what we're dealing with here.
Gotcha. So Puyallup Coog / Ben Coog, still in Ben, the name hasn't changed. This is probably just a change over to the new software that's causing this. You're Puyallup Coog to us forever now. You're never going to be Ben Coog again. Sorry, I'm not going to say your name. You don't want me. You specifically asked me not to say your name, so I'm not going to say it.
You do say a lot of people's names, though.
Some of them are comedians. Some of them are comedians who I know do not care and who actually probably only comment because I continue to say their name. Otherwise, they would probably stop commenting. Okay, let's play the home run game. This has been a good, quick show. I've enjoyed it. I also hear our baby is stirring, and so I got to get going. I'm going to let's do me first, and then if I end up having to drop off, we'll figure that out at a different time, but you give me your home run person first.
All right. We do know as of our last get together, things aren't going so well for you.
Yeah.
You're in a slump. I don't
have the actual score right now, but I'll put it together after this episode.
It's not good. Yeah, I know it's not good.
Not good.
Okay. So today, I was struggling to find you a guy today, but I think I found one that I like. I don't think we've done him before, but maybe we have. It's a very I would say this guy's kind of an interesting character in the history of recent baseball. No longer active in the game, since I know you hate active players, but a recent departure from the game, I would say. And that guy is Yasiel Puig.
Oh man, Yasiel Puig was a guy. He was he's on a list. I have a list on my phone now, and he's the guy whose name I was trying to think of a couple days ago. That's a great one. So what? Yasiel Puig comes up with the Dodgers, I think. Can you give me that? He came up with the Dodgers, right? Like in the pre Magic Johnson era of the Dodgers, like
Yeah, he was a Dodger to start out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I know like comes out ablazing, but he's like a classic Latin American player, like where he's tons of athleticism, does not walk for shit, hits for a ton of. He's got four tool. He's got five tools, and the sixth tool that is sometimes more important, the like eye does not have. There's great quote from somebody that's you don't walk off the island. I think I might have seen it in the movie Sugar, which is a great baseball movie, by the way, but it's like pretty commonly used to talk about Dominican players. He's
Cuban.
He's Cuban. I understand
Cuban.
that. I recognize he's Cuban, but these are like these. There are similar philosophies across a lot of the areas where I would say there are like these kind of exploitative academies and baseball programs. Which, by the way, that next time we have a podcast, if maybe it'll be off my mind by then. But there's a great episode of Keyshawn Johnson has a podcast called something. Go find it. It's on YouTube. But he did a great episode with David Justice talking about why there aren't as many black players in baseball anymore. Really, really interesting. One of the things he talked about is like Major League Baseball puts all this money into academies in on these islands in Latin America, but not in the inner cities. They don't actually invest a bunch of money in the inner cities. Love to talk about that with you if it remains a topic of interest in a couple weeks. The David Justice thing in particular. But Yasiel Puig, I'm going to go plays like 11 seasons. It feels like there's no way that guy could have already entered his 30s, but he almost certainly has. Maybe 11 is high. I bet he never hits 40 home runs, but when he hits those 33 home runs, they're so fucking exciting. He was such a fun player to watch. What is it? It's got to be like injury shortened career. So I'm going to say like 11 years with some injuries at the back end. Came out blazing is my memory. Unless he's in prison, which I don't think he is.
I don't think he is either.
I don't think he is. So I'm going to say like in a healthy year, he probably averaged like low 30s, 33, 35 home runs, and then had some trail off. 240 home runs, and I'm ready to kill myself with what you're going to say.
The slump continues. I'll
Fuck
say that.
me in the butt.
Yeah, I'll say that. You kind of missed.
I don't even know if I'm high or low.
You kind of missed on all fronts.
Great.
So first of all, he plays just 7 years.
Oh my God.
Which doesn't seem possible because again, it's like revisionist history. He was such a character that your memory of him is strong. Like you remember him as being like kind of this fun character, but also this polarizing character who seemed to like piss off coaches and teammates alike, but then at the same time be like kind of this funny, cartoonish guy online, So he was interesting. He was also one of those guys that like I felt like every year Mariners fans wanted him to be a Mariner. Because again, when you just watch him play, you're like, God, the ball just flies off his bat. He's jacked. He's fast in the outfield. He's got a strong throwing arm. He's like, if you could like build a prototypical baseball player, he's kind of it. He's everything you want, but like he just can't put all of that together to be a consistent everyday force in the lineup. So he only plays 7 years, but like you said, he starts with the Dodgers. He comes up in 2013 at the age of 22. I remember he came up initially as a third baseman, which I don't know that he ever really appeared much at third base.
Is that right?
He didn't actually play a single game in the major leagues at third base. Doesn't look like.
I don't remember the third base thing at all. That's surprising.
In the minors, he was a third baseman, but they made him an outfielder. 2014, he actually makes an all-star team. The only time in his career he does that. He sticks with the Dodgers he stuck there through all of 2018. So then in 2019, he plays for the Reds and for Cleveland, and that's it. He hasn't been in the major league since, which doesn't seem possible that it's been 5 full years since we've last seen Yasiel Puig, but that is the reality of where we're at. And in 2019, he was just 28 years of age. So, 5 years later, he's 33 right now. He should be in his prime.
Yeah,
he's not in the major
I will say
leagues.
I'd be more excited about a 33-year-old Yasiel Puig signing from the Mariners than a 27-year-old Victor Robles.
Yeah,
with no information about what Puig is doing right now.
Puig is one of those guys that like it feels like a decade or two from now he's going to have a documentary on him or 30 for 30 or something, just because he's so interesting of a character.
I would love that.
Yeah, 7 years. So he only plays 7 years. His 162 game average for home runs is 25. So you're definitely on the high end. And he only eclipsed that number once in a season, which shows you how limited his playing time was, whether it was injuries or just, platoons or whatever. So you said 240, I believe?
Yeah.
The number is 132.
Wow,
so
amazing.
Much like many of Yasiel Puig's at bats, a big swing and a miss.
So, okay, let's hope I can make some of this back, because I have a guy for you who is probably the very inverse of Yasiel Puig, a guy who's not particularly exciting on the field, who came through the like classic American system, gets drafted out of high school, and then just is a big, like, strapping dude that's going to be, feels like a classic 1940s baseball player, Adam Dunn.
Oh man, Adam Dunn. God, feels like one that we've had before, and I probably missed on. You might have given me Adam Dunn way back, but I don't.
I actually think I might have found the sheet. So let me real quickly see if I can track it down. But
it would have been very early on.
You wax poetic, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I don't. Man, Adam Dunn is a tough one. That is a really tough one. God, he comes up around 2000-ish, like 2000, 2001 maybe, with the Reds. He was like Griffey's running mate, and what Buhner was to the Mariners and Griffey, Adam Dunn was to the Reds and Griffey, and they were the best of buds. And things seemed like they were headed in the right direction for the old Cincinnati Reds, and then Griffey couldn't stay healthy, and the Reds continued to suck. But Adam Dunn, man, he was one of those guys that could hit the crap out of a baseball when he connected with it. He was a guy that, like, I felt like I had him on my fantasy team a lot, but all you got out of him was home runs. He was almost like before his time. Like, if he was in the game now, he'd be like elite. But at the time, I don't think his full skill set was being appreciated, like the power that he had. And granted, he was still considered, I'm sure he made some all-star teams and was considered a pretty good player overall. But now I'm just stalling.
By the way, I don't think that I had.
Maybe you haven't. I know at the end of his career, he kind of bounces around a little bit. Plays first base and outfield for most of his career. I'm sure he DH'd in there.
Boy, were you hoping that we had already had him, weren't you? I could feel it in your voice.
His career is weird because it's like I know he's been retired for a while now, but I also know he only came up around 2000. So maybe he has like about a 10 to 15 year career, but I'm not like sure what end of that 10 to 15 years.
We got to stop this real quick because Cash Liam says that TNT had a documentary on Puig last night, which feels like the time when I posted online I had a middle-aged Mutant Ninja Turtles bit, and then my friend texted me. He's like, "Hey, did you put that out because of the SNL sketch?" And then I just couldn't tell a joke anymore after that specific joke.
I got to go find this documentary. Thank you for the heads up. Although this is one thing I hate about network TV now, or cable, basic cable TV. When they air something like that, it's impossibly hard to find if you don't catch it live. But sure. We're gonna find it. We're gonna watch it because I would love to see that. Okay, back to Adam Dunn here. So I'm gonna say he's got a 10 to 15 year career. He definitely has some big seasons. He definitely, like what you were saying about Puig in the 30s and maybe even 40s, like Dunn actually lived that. I don't think his 162 game average was 25 home runs like it was for Puig. I think it was more in the 30s. So if he has a 10-year career and he's in the 30s, then he's 300 home run hitter. But he might have gotten up there to around 400, but I don't think he did. Man, I have like a huge variance. Usually when I do this process and I have a variance on guys, I can narrow it down to like where I feel comfortable within 50. I don't feel comfortable within 100 on Adam Dunn. That's how bad this is going to be. So this is going to be a wild stab, and I'm going to say 315.
Oh baby. We have re-entered the game.
It's bad, huh?
It's bad. You said 315, 315?
Yeah.
So Adam Dunn has 5 straight seasons from 2004 to 2008 where he has 40 or more home runs. In fact, 4 of those seasons straight, 2005 through 2008, he has exactly 40 home runs. 46 in 2004.
Give me the give me the 162.
The 162 game average is 37 home runs.
Okay, so I wasn't like terribly far off.
No, you started to kind of circle the right area, and I think it's probable that what you did is you took a little too much off the beginning and a little too much off the end.
Yeah,
he has 2013 is his second to last season. He has 34 home runs. 2012 he has 41 home runs. Like you said, he only made 2 All-Star games, but I do think I agree with you that he played in a time that did not appreciate his skill set, that really penalized strikeouts, and he led the league in strikeouts 4 times, but he only had over 200 strikeouts in a season one time, which was 2012, one of the years he had 222 strikeouts, and led the league in both strikeouts and walks. Yeah, he's like the classic 3 true outcomes hitter, a guy who is going to have, what do you have, like a career 364 on base, 237 batting average, 490 slugging percentage, so isolated power of almost 260 for 462 home runs, which I feel like this has to be your biggest miss to date.
Yeah. Like I said, I wasn't comfortable even within 100, and clearly that played itself out. I didn't think he had that many because like there's never even been an Adam Dunn Hall of Fame discussion. But I feel like at 462, he's going to be one of those guys that like you're going to have to discuss it at some point, even if it's like the Veterans Committee that brings him in much later, like they did with Fred McGriff. So yeah, he seems like a guy that could be destined for the Hall of Fame at some point in time with numbers like that.
Yeah, a guy that he's like kind of like an Eli Manning of power hitters, where he just like was around long enough and like pretty healthy for actually most of his career that he just accumulated crazy big numbers and then went underappreciated. I think.
Man, I was never even gonna get close to that. I was like afraid to say 400. I assumed he was less. So like the highest I was gonna go was like 350. So I would have missed bad no matter what I said, but I made it worse by going on the low end of 300. So yeah, oh boy, you got me. You got a good one today.
I either got you or you sandbagged the whole thing to make it competitive again. We'll never know.
Yeah. Luckily, you missed again today. So
I missed pretty bad. I would have taken the lead if I had a respectable.
Yeah, when you compound your last miss with this one, hopefully I still have a good lead, but we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Well, my computer's about to die. My kid is about to be home. We're gonna go watch a movie. So I will talk to you later. The Casey McLean everywhere. Come see me do stand up. I don't know. I don't have time to plug it. My computer's gonna die.
Alex, thanks for joining us.